Let's start off by talking about the anatomy of a dispatching business. So, what is a dispatching business? Really, what a dispatching business is a business that helps owner-operators of a trucking company find freight, speak with brokers, conduct negotiations, dispatch drivers, handle backlog, and just set up routes that will make the most money for the trucking company. In most cases, the owners of these trucking companies are also the drivers of the truck, so handling the load booking aspect and everything that comes with it becomes a tedious task for these owner operators. So that's where the dispatching business comes in. So here's a quick diagram to kind of break down the anatomy of a dispatching business and the parties involved. So you have first you have the motor carrier, which can also be referred to as the trucking company, which tends to hire a dispatch company to work on behalf of the motor carrier in order to book loads and handle all the backlog required during the process. So our job as dispatchers is to make sure that we find the best loads possible for our clients and the drivers. So on the other side of the transaction, you have the brokers, which are hired by the customers who need their freight moved from point A to point B. So a customer will give a set budget to their broker to have their freight moved. The broker will then post the freight on a load board or reach out to a existing carrier which they've done business with in the past and try to have the load moved. So in essence, the role of a broker is to find a truck to haul a load for his or her customer at the lowest possible rate in order to increase their own profit margins. So for example, a customer might say, hey, I have this load that needs to be moved from Atlanta to Texas, and I'm willing to pay $4,000 for this. The broker will then post the load on a board and offer to pay maybe $2,000 to the truck driver and keep the other $2,000 to themselves. That's why as dispatchers, our role is to make sure that we fight for our motor carriers and negotiate on their behalf and try to squeeze out as much money as we can from the broker, because our income is directly related to how much our clients make. So the more money our motor carrier makes, the more money we make, because we will be invoicing our client a percentage of their weekly gross income. So in general, a dispatcher and a broker are both a middleman. So now this is a general view of the anatomy of a dispatching business and the parties involved. You'll almost never deal with the customers. You'll mainly be dealing with your client, which in this case is the motor carrier, and you'll be dealing with the broker. So what's the role of a dispatcher in this logistics business? Well, in short, a dispatcher is basically a virtual assistant with a specialized skills working on behalf of the motor carrier. Dispatchers are middlemen between the motor carrier, which in this case would be your client, and the freight broker. So dispatcher's main objective is to book loads and perform admin work for their motor carrier. I always get asked, do I need some sort of special licensing to be a dispatcher? And the answer is no. So to become a dispatcher, you're not required to have any sort of licensing. You're strictly operating under the motor carrier's MC authority and basically working on behalf of your client as a virtual employee. So your role as a dispatcher would be to call brokers that post loads on load boards, which meet your carrier's criteria, and go over the details of the loads with your driver or your carrier and proceed with the booking. So we're going to go over in detail on how to book loads in the coming lessons, so don't worry about that right now. So before booking loads, you as a dispatcher, as I mentioned, will call brokers to obtain all the necessary details about potential load which your carrier might be interested in. You'll ask the broker things like where the load picks up at, where it delivers, the times, the weight, the commodity, the rate for the load. You will negotiate the best possible rate for that potential load and then go ahead and present that load option to the carrier in a streamlined process. I'll be teaching you how to do all this in more detail in the coming lessons. This is just a general overview of what your role would be as a dispatcher. Now, once your carrier agrees on a load which you've presented to him, you will then go back to the broker and ask to book the load. The broker would then send you a carrier packet, assuming that this is your carrier's first time working with this broker. You will then fill out the carrier packet and inform the broker once it's complete. So a carrier packet is basically a sign-up form between the broker and your carrier. So brokers can't just give you your carrier a load without making sure they meet all the requirements, like having proper insurance, active MC authority, and a few other things. Now, once a carrier packet is complete, the broker will then put your carrier in their system and send you a rate confirmation, which basically is a legal binding document with all of the load details, such as pickup and drop addresses, along with how much the load was booked for. You will then sign the rate confirmation and send it back to the broker and email it to your carrier. Again, we'll go over this process in more detail in the coming lessons, so don't worry too much about it right now. But this is basically the chunk of what we'll be doing as a dispatcher, which is booking loads that fit your carrier's criteria. So over time, you will know the type of loads your carrier will want and the rates, and you can just book loads quicker without having to check with your carrier. So another responsibility of a dispatcher is to communicate with brokers about driver status updates and any issues that arise at shippers or receivers with a load. So if there's any issues or delays at shippers and receivers, your job would be to reach out to the broker and push him or her to call their customer to have your driver loaded or unloaded quicker. So sometimes it can't be helped if there's a long line at the shippers or receivers, or if your driver missed his appointment. But most of the time, communicating with the brokers, it would be very beneficial for you and your carrier. And in most cases, when you are communicating with the brokers, it's mainly done through email, because I've noticed that brokers tend to be busy on calls, but they are able to respond to the emails much quicker. So another thing, load pre-planning is another responsibility of a great dispatcher. So if you want to be good at what you do, you must pre-plan your routes for your carrier. You should know where you'll be booking your next load to and think 2 steps ahead so that drivers can plan their hours and drive time accordingly. So it's important that you stay on top of the loads boards and have your carriers booked at least a day ahead. So when drivers don't know what or when their next load is, they start getting stressed and think that you're not doing your job. So you want to make sure when you book loads that you're not booking loads to bad areas, or the driver might get stuck the next day and not be able to come out of that area. So we'll talk a bit more about booking loads in the next lessons, but for now let's move on and talk about why carriers hire dispatchers. So there's a few reasons as to why carriers would want to hire dispatchers. So first being convenience and efficiency. So driving a truck while also dispatching can be a huge hassle for most owner-operators, and it's just something that they would just rather avoid. So sometimes truck drivers that dispatch themselves, they tend to miss out on great paying loads because they're too busy driving, or they might be in a bad cellular area, or they might be trying to secure a load on their trailer and they just can't check the load board on their phone. So a dedicated dispatcher in this case can help them pre-plan loads so that the drivers can focus on driving and planning their time accordingly. So another reason as to why carriers hire dispatchers is due to all the administrative work needed to be done on the back end when booking loads. So most owner-operators miss out on good loads because they're not set up with brokers, and I've seen it happen many times. When an owner-operator is trying to frantically fill out a carrier packet on their mobile device, and a broker just gives the load to another carrier, which happens to be already set up with them. Or maybe the other carrier just has a dedicated dispatcher who quickly goes through the carrier packets on their desktop. So in some cases, brokers will even require the carrier packets to be done by hand, and most truck drivers do not carry fax machines or printers with them. So another reason as to why a carrier might want to hire a dispatcher is that they may not like working on their phones, negotiating and just being bossed around by a broker. It's not really a fun thing for a lot of these drivers. So most truck drivers, they would just rather let their dispatchers deal with the brokers. Another thing I've noticed is a lot of truck drivers, they don't really know how to negotiate properly. So a lot of these brokers tend to walk over these drivers, and it's not really fun for them. So an owner operator would just rather provide an ultimatum to their dispatcher and let the dispatcher handle the negotiations and just general communication with the broker. Another big advantage of carriers that hire dispatchers is that dispatchers tend to have experience in solving problems. So as a dispatcher, over time, you will become very familiar with how to handle common issues and how to deal with brokers. You'll be considered an experienced dispatcher at that point. And experienced dispatchers tend to face a lot of the same logistics problems on a daily basis. So this gives the dispatchers an advantage at solving problems quicker and more efficiently over a truck driver without the same level of expertise. So in the coming lessons, we'll go over these common problems and how to solve them so that you'll be an expert dispatcher in your field without having the years of experience required to, know how to solve some of these common problems.